Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today we're checking out the blue-black bounce deck with the additions from Aetherdrift. So some of the core cards in this deck include Fear of Isolation, a 2/3 flyer. As an additional cost to cast it, we have to return a permanent we control to its owner's hand, which actually turns into an upside in this deck since we've got lots of cheap permanents that provide a nice effect when they enter the battlefield. And then we also have this Town Ain't Big Enough, which we're usually casting for 2 mana as an instant that can both return an opposing permanent to hand as well as returning our own non-land permanent back to our hand. So that's how we get that 3 mana discount, and once again we can pick up cards that we actively want to pick up again, so we can redeploy them, such as at 1 mana Hopeless Nightmare, making the opponent discard a card and lose 2 life. We've got the addition of Grim Bauble from Aetherdrift, giving an opposing creature -2/-2 when it enters. Can be a very nice solution to some of the red aggro decks. And then there's Stormchaser's Talent, which makes a 1/1 Otter token with prowess, and then we can also level this up for 4 mana, returning an instant or sorcery from our graveyard to our hand, which is quite convenient as it can pick up this Town Ain't Big Enough, which in turn can bounce the talent back to our hand as well as an opposing permanent, rinse and repeat, so that's a pretty powerful late game engine. And then a Spyglass Siren, a 1/1 flying creature, making a map token when it enters, so we can explore, also good to return to hand. Then at 2 mana, besides our Fear of Isolation, there's the Floodpit's Drowner, a 2/1 creature that we can flash in at instant speed, has Vigilance, and when it enters can tap down an opposing creature, as well as put a stun counter on it, so it won't be able to untap for another turn. And then the Drowner is also a card we can potentially pick back up to once again stun an opposing creature. Momentum Breaker, another new addition from Aetherdrift, making the opponent sacrifice a creature or vehicle of their choice. If they cannot, then they still have to discard a card at least, so it's not dead against control decks. And it also will start our engine, so we can increase our speed and at some point sacrifice Momentum Breaker if we don't want to pick it back up, and then gain life equal to our speed, which can be up to 4, so that's pretty useful against aggro decks. And then Nowhere to Run, another great removal spell to play in this archetype, giving an opposing creature -3/-3 until end of turn when it enters, and it also shuts down all opposing ward and hexproof abilities, so this is especially useful against the red-white aura decks, which play cards like Shelter by Ghosts and Shard Mage's Rescue, but can also be effective in the mirror match, since your opponents are likely to also have Kaito, Bane of Nightmares, which has hexproof during your turn when it turns into a creature, and this is a card we want to sneak into play with a ninjutsu mechanic by picking up an unblocked creature, so once again a way to pick up our own creatures, so very good with Spyglass Siren and the Floodpit's Drowner especially, but also good with Fear of Isolation if we have other things to return. Occasionally can also pick up our own Otter token, although then it's going to be gone, so ideally we have other creatures instead. And then we can sneak in Kaito, immediately hit the opponent for 3, and then start using the various abilities, either pumping all ninjas, which is just Kaito in this deck. The Zero ability lets us surveil 2 and then draw if our opponent lost life, which we can also enable with our Hopeless Nightmare, for instance. And then finally can also -2, tapping down a creature and putting 2 stun counters on it, so that also synergizes well with the Drowner in case we already had one in play. And then finally 2 copies of Enduring Curiosity, another card that's very good if you've got some evasive creatures like Spyglass Siren and the Fear of Isolation hitting the opponent, since now we get to draw additional cards as well. And then the mana base also has access to Restless Reef as another threat, turning into a 4/4 creature with a Death Touch that can mill the opponent for 4 if it attacks, so that can also help close out games against control decks. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play with a keepable hand. We'll be bouncing our talent a few times, most likely. We're prepared against aggro with double Nowhere to Run. We'll have to pick up some more lands to eventually level this up to return our instant. Not the best hand against control decks or decks that can kind of go over the top. For now, Llanowar Elves I'm happy to remove. And hit you for 2. Insidious Roots, I see. A graveyard deck. Yeah, graveyard decks are also pretty good against us, since we don't have any graveyard hates. But we can play a talent and then still have this available, potentially bouncing the roots if our opponent threatens to get some plants out of it, or we can just answer the plants themselves. And Tyvar. Alright, so I guess that resolves. We'll wait for Tyvar to minus. And then I probably bounce the roots now. So they don't get to make a plant, which would immediately be able to tap for mana thanks to Tyvar as well. Opponent mills an Overlord, gets back the Llanowar Elves, and plays a Mold Tender, which can also still tap for mana, thanks to Tyvar. And a Gorehound, alright, so that's a lot of stuff, and would have been a lot of plants with the root still in play. Can at least take out Tyvar, and answer some of the opponent's creatures. Mold Tender is scarier with the roots than the Llanowar Elves, especially with a relatively full graveyard. So what are we looking at? Definitely want to get rid of the Gorehound as well. So I guess, yeah, I can only play one removal spell in black. Could always bounce with this down in big enough. Yeah, this might just be another talent turn. And then I can just know where to run the Gorehound to be mana efficient, since Bauble seems to be good enough to answer the 1/1s. Take care of Tyvar. And then next turn we can Bauble maybe the Mold Tender while bouncing more stuff. But Gorehound helps enable their entire deck, so I think that was still worth taking out. Opponent runs out Tyvar. And another Overlord. Yeah, they're going off. There's the Cauldron as well. Possible they're playing Loot just for the exhaust ability out of the graveyard. And yeah, the plants can immediately make mana with the other Tyvar. So all of a sudden our opponent's got an enormous board. But they're at 13. And we can deal some damage. If I Bauble and use this town in big enough, we could also answer a plant. Although possible that Mold Tender is more problematic. Yeah, it might be Bauble, Gorehound, bounce Mold Tender, taking out Tyvar. And then the Siren might have to cross the finish line for us. Because Mold Tender would trigger Insidious Roots. I think that's better than bouncing the plant, although it's close. And definitely have to take out Tyvar. And then our opponent's going to be at 7. But they've got a pretty strong board. Ooh, Ketramos, was not expecting that one. They have 2 cards in exile. Mold Tender currently the only way to exile more cards. Okay, so Bauble the Mold Tender for sure. Although sadly can't really attack with the Otters past the 2/3. So we'll explore onto the Flyer. Another town in big enough. Does trigger Prowess, bounces a plant, gets back a Bauble, has to be good enough. So then I don't think I attack here. Although it's close. I lose 1 Otter. Opponent might double block another. Take 2. Or they just take 4, fall to 3. And they're still not close to enabling Ketramos. So they kind of have to top deck. Next turn I do get to trigger the Otters twice if I bounce and Bauble. So I think I'm better off waiting. Just a land, that's okay. Alright, so I want to tap manually. Bounce your plants, bounce my Bauble. Bobble answers another plant. Attack all out. Opponent has to jump. And now the life loss from Catramos can also turn into a disadvantage. And that'll do it. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a keepable hand. A Drowner good to pick up with Kaito. Talent for additional pressure. And then a good mix of interaction and removal. But a third land's going to be important, and we found it. So we'll just hit for 1. Wouldn't be opposed to our opponent playing a creature we can tap down here. Although, of course, a bat is going to snipe Kaito. Still worth it to play Drowner. Definitely a more aggressive line I'm taking, since tapping down a slasher would be better value, perhaps. I don't think there's a world where they don't take Kaito. Alright, opponent actually goes for Momentum Breaker. So now I do get to Ninjutsu Kaito. Possible they have an answer to it in hand. And then we'll draw. Alright, those are both pretty decent. Do I have a preference which one to draw first? So next turn they could Edict Kaito, they could play their Demon Enchantment, or they could just play a Slasher. Those are kind of the common play patterns. So then, what lines up best? I would maybe just go Nightmare, Fear, Nightmare again. I think this can maybe wait a turn until the demons show up. And yeah, there's a Slasher. So Kaito can also tap it down with the -2. And then for now it's going to be double Nightmare with Fear of Isolation, triggering Prowess a bunch too. Yeah, this was an excellent hand on the play as well. And we've got answers for the demons once they show up. Because yeah, large flyer can potentially stop our attacks. But between Drowner, Kaito, and our bounce spell, we've got plenty of answers. And the stun counters also make it so that if we find removal for Slasher, it's not coming back. And there's an Archfiend. And yeah, we've got a multitude of answers here. Can Drowner tap down Archfiends, and nowhere to run answers the Bat, and we've got an all-out attack that's lethal. But yeah, with all the stun counters, it's also possible we can use Archfiend as our win condition just by tapping it down for enough turns. Sweet, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw with a keepable hand, missing interaction, so that's what we're hoping to pick up, facing what could be a domain deck. I'll start with Talon, since next turn we can enable Prowess at least once if we go Nightmare plus Siren. And there's an Up the Beanstalk, so yeah, that's a tricky card to fight through. But we'll try. Hit you for 2, and then next turn probably going for another Nightmare, can maybe go exploring as our opponent uses Hurt Migration to hit our land drop. But they had a tap land as well. They wanted to shuffle before surveilling, which makes sense, although Kaito's awesome here, so we can attack and then ninjutsu. Pick up Siren. And Kaito can draw. And then Fear of Isolation looks good. Another talent is probably not needed. So we're diversifying our threats a little bit. They will still have answers to Kaito, like Leyline Binding, of course. And there's Get Lost, which is commonly played as well. This is naming Avatar. Nowhere to Run. Could also take care of some of the opponent's creatures. Could Nowhere to Run. And then Drowner main phase to tap another one down. Or we could use Kaito's -2 if we scroll down here. Stunning one of their creatures. And then keeping a Drowner until end of turn. So we don't overextend into a board wipe. Yeah, that's an option. Or we could play Siren and explore, which is also reasonable.
Sit down. Rethink.
Kaito already has a target on its back, so explore onto the altar token. Get Lost takes care of Kaito.
Don't worry, I've got an exit strategy.
And an Overlord will draw with Beanstalk. Well, at least we can keep up the pressure with our creatures. And Hopeless Nightmare represents quite a bit of damage with our altar as well. So play 2 of those, that's 4 damage. Altar hits for 3, so 7, 8. Yeah, if I can explore some non-lands here, we could get there. Fear of Isolation, alright, so let's say I keep that on top. And then bottom to be guaranteed the extra +1 counter, and then double Nightmare. That should be Xaxes. So yeah, we managed to sneak right underneath the domain deck. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. This hand's missing cheap creatures to enable Kaito, but it is still a functional hand, so I don't think we can mulligan. Turn 1 Nightmare. And our opponent's on a red deck. Hardfire Hero, good to Nowhere to Run, so we don't take damage from it. So yeah, a decent start, all things considered. Challenger we can now remove instead. Although it's still a close call, because Hero can be scarier later in the game. Now Fear, pick up Nightmare, play Nightmare, looks good. Still have Nowhere to Run if Screaming Nemesis shows up. And then Fear with Kaito is not bad if we can kind of chain it together, pick up Nightmare again. Opponent discarding a Swiss Spear. And this attack implies Monstrous Rage, which they're probably playing regardless. Okay. Take 5. And our opponent passes. So don't hate Kaito. A lockdown Hero, although I guess a haste creature could then finish it off for a burn spell. So maybe we're just better off taking out the Heartfire Hero this turn. If I do it now, they could have another Monstrous Rage technically, so maybe I should just pass and see what happens. Opponent goes to attackers. Could also, of course, bounce with this town ain't big enough, so we don't run any real risks. See if they have a pump spell they want to use. They don't. Yeah, tricky spots. I don't hate bouncing and then picking up my Nowhere to Run just to aim for the long game. Even though I'm sure we can still get value out of the Hopeless Nightmare. Yeah, I'll just pick up the removal spell. Okay, so now going for Kaito, and then just maybe plussing could be reasonable. since it does seem like our opponent has 1 mana interaction in hand.
Watch closely.
And this way Kaito is less likely to die.
Just try to keep up.
Opponent found land 3 for Screaming Nemesis, that's fine, we've got the answer in hand. And our opponent's just going face, ignoring Kaito. Alright, so now we've got a ton of options. I don't think it's Curiosity. Fear, pick up Nightmare to get rid of burn spells could be better. And then we still know where to run the Nemesis, which I can do right now to play around Monstrous Rage. Witchstalker Frenzy discarded. Take out the Nemesis. And then what to do with Kaito here is kind of interesting. Might just be +1 once again. It's not like I lack card advantage. Hit you for 5 and then next turn we're threatening lethal with Kaito. So the Fear could even block. Another Nemesis makes sense. And I'll just take 3. And now we have a couple ways we could do this, including Kaito minusing on Heartfire Hero. There's a Restless Reef that can attack. And for 1 mana, there's nothing that can really go wrong, since we're not attacking with enough creatures for a Witchstalker Frenzy. And that'll do it. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Playing kind of the control role early with Nightmare, nowhere to run, and some bounce spells. And then hope to find a creature eventually. Alright, turn 1 talent helps. Very good with Town Ain't Big Enough. Facing what could be a dinosaur deck. And yep, turn 2, play Hasty Dino. At least I don't have the mana to take out my altar. But nowhere to run lines up pretty favorably here. Could also just take the hit and then add Siren to the board while playing Nightmare. Since this is legendary, they might have another one in hand. And there could be scarier creatures that still die to nowhere to run. Take 2. And a Hammer Skull, a good one to potentially bounce, since that buys us quite a bit of time. So bounce Hammer Skull, pick up my Nightmare is my first instinct, and we could do that now. Plus play a tapped land, or still go untap land Nightmare to get prowess damage in while we can. Yeah, I guess that's okay. And then next turn I could once again pick up Nightmare and play a 2 mana bounce spell. Opponent did indeed have another legendary dino in hand. And Frillback this time can blow up an enchantment or gain 4 life. It's gonna blow up our Nightmare. Opponent's tired of it, but we do now get to scry 2. Bauble doesn't do much. Untapped land is not strictly necessary. I can still know where to run, answer the Frillback. I guess I could level up my talent, pick up another Town Ain't Big Enough with an untapped land. But I can also explore, so that still uses up my mana. Yeah, I think that's okay. Could have also kept land on top and then non-land, so we're guaranteed a non-land to put in the graveyard with the Explore. So we did have quite a few options. Now, yeah, let's go exploring with our flyer. another talent. Feels a little slow to level that one up as well. And a 1/1 prowess could still be reasonable, but I think we've got better top decks. A Kaito here would be awesome. Potentially a reason to put counters on the Otter, but against dinos a flyer is more likely to keep attacking. And then if they have some expensive dinosaurs in hands, this is a pretty good answer to try and tempo them out. Alright, a hasty 4/4 is actually pretty good. Keeping the 2/3 on defense. So yeah, without a Nightmare we can't win the game right now. Bouncing their haste creature doesn't seem great, because then they would be able to replay it and take something out. So instead, I'm probably looking to, I guess, Restless Reef could get in there, forcing a chump. Yeah, that's probably good enough, actually. Any reason to mill myself over my opponents? So this can also attack since they're forced to block. Now I'll just mill my opponents, get some more info on what they might be playing. And then I don't expect to die here, even if they play another Raptor. It's gonna be the Imperiosaur pumping all dinosaurs. And do we attack? They do not. Momentum Breakers, pretty awesome too here. Can play it, pick it up, and clear a path, and that should be game. And our opponent scoops it up. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a keepable hand. Up against Swamp. And looks like a cut down. Alright, I'll pick up the talent then. Go for the throat is next. Opponent's going up the curve. So I think I prefer triple 1-drop over Fear of Isolation, so we can kind of pick and choose what to return next turn. Currently don't have the best answer to a Slasher or a Bloodletter for that matter. Opponent could play the Demon Enchantment, which is also going to stick around. Yeah, the Annex. So we want to find our bounce spell. For now, Fear, pick up Nightmare. Could also go exploring if we feel like we need to hit our land drop, which is also fair. And then let me maybe explore onto the flyer still. Alright, perfect. So now I can still Fear, pick up Nightmare, and cast it. Triggering Prowess. And does our opponent have a demon in hand? Just a Slasher that we can still fly over. And a cut down is their last card, although they're gonna get to draw once again. Okay, so I can empty their hand with Fear, picking up Nightmare. And then with Bobble, I can kind of force them to chump with a Slasher, which might be okay. And then the Slasher's not going to bother us for a while. Opponent had a Leyline of the Void in hand. Attack. Alright, opponent took it, so they fall to 3. So they're definitely counting on untapped land, make a demon token. And they actually got there. Alright, so that's pretty irrelevant here. Opponent's now gaining a life instead of losing it. Might have to put an upkeep stop to surveil, find this town ain't big enough. Because that could just be game over here. Yeah, that seems worthwhile. And I would rather bounce my Nightmare back as opposed to the Bauble at this point. That's not what we were hoping for. Take my draw, and a Kaito I'm now unable to put in play. That's rough. So, don't really have a good attack anymore. So yeah, that I'll land into Demon. No answer for it, and now the rest takes Kaito, that's painful. And a Bloodletter means Slasher's lethal if it hits me. And I have to chump the Demon as well, so yeah, that's just game over now. So yeah, we had a promising start, but we were just missing the bounce spell to close it out. And now we're just super dead. Play Curiosity, Trump, still take a million. Alright, GG's. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Hand seems functional. And our opponent with a double Leyline of Hope start. Alright, so opponent's on the life gain deck. And yeah, let's bobble the Hawk, otherwise that's going to gain them a lot of life next turn. So our opponent being on the double Leyline is kind of like being on a double mulligan if we can keep the opponent's creatures in check, which this hand's pretty good at. So that's lucky. For now, could be convinced to play Drowner over, just nowhere to run. Siren plus Explore was also an option, but with a Drowner we can actually start attacking. And now we don't need to worry about the Hawk for a few turns. Pridemate needs life gain to grow. I do need to hit my land drop here, so it might be Siren Explore. Even though it's possible Pridemate grows out of range from nowhere to run. But I think it's worth it. And I'll explore onto the flyer, I think. Right, perfect. So we can still play the talent. If they have something like a Shelter by Ghosts, nowhere to run, can still ignore the ward. For now, just a bat. Yeah, being able to make a 2/2 flyer would be nice. For now, could go for another talent and then pass with 2 mana up. Pass a turn. Question is if I Floodpit's Drowner the Healer's Hawk here. I think I do, because I would rather trade for the bat so they don't get to scry end of turn. Vanguard does get to trigger here, however, which also grows the Pridemate. So would I then rather take out the Vanguard, Pridemate, or still one of the life-linking flyers? Because I wouldn't mind trading for their flyers with the Siren. Pridemate would trigger only after they attack with the flying creatures, so I think Vanguard might actually be the creature to remove here. Even though I have to do it now before it gets a chance to trigger. Because if the Pridemate grows, we'll just bounce it or keep it locked down, so it's not a huge concern. And opponent keeps the Ruin Lurker. Still take the trade. And they get to scry. Land 4 enables Enduring Curiosity, although this might be a town ain't big enough turn. Could even bounce the ley lines actually, but I think we want to focus on the creatures. And if I bounce Pridemate and Bauble, we can take out the bat, attack, and then we're in pretty decent shape. Sure. And then next turn the Curiosity is going to look a lot better. An argument for playing Drowner over Bauble, but we did get to trigger Prowess, and it's possible their creatures are going to be larger than the -2/-2 can remove. But that'll do it. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We only have blue mana to start out, but we do get to explore. Yeah, this seems keepable. So I think it is Siren on 1. Over Talent, since we may not enable Prowess for a while. Ooh, Llanowar Elves is a good one to drown, even though now I could also Nightmare. But yeah, if we drown her in the opponent's upkeep, this will be a lockdown for 2 turns, basically. And there's not too many instants in mono green for 2 mana. Alright. Opponent is green-white, maybe a Collector's Cage deck, as we see the Paw Patch recruit. Okay, so now looking at Nightmare, Fear of Isolation, pick up Nightmare. I think I prefer that over Talent, since the opponent's creatures are eventually gonna outclass our Otter tokens, whereas Nightmare still gets a card out of their hand. But it's certainly a close call, since I would be triggering Prowess in the upcoming turns. But yeah, we can start by attacking. Next turn we can explore to maybe hit our land drop for a turn. There are rare cases where Fear of Isolation wants to pick up your own lands if you missed your land drop for a turn, so then you can still play it and maybe have access to an extra mana. Alright, Sheltered by Ghosts is only a temporary solution, since we have an answer, but it is going to cost us extra mana now. Unless we were to top deck Nowhere to Run, which can ignore the ward. And Drowner is exiled, so if that returns, we can lock something else down. Opponent's offering the trade. I mean, that seems fine. I'll just trade, tap down the Elves again. Because if I don't draw land 4, we might not get to this town ain't big enough. And we find another Fear. So discard, Fear, pick up Nightmare once again. The fact that they're playing Sanctuary implies that they don't have the Bright Glass Gearhulk in their build. So more likely to be an Overlord of the Mistmoors build. But yeah, opponent already throws in the towel. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. Get to play Talents. Fear, maybe pick up Talents. We've got some removal. Seems okay. Could use an extra land or two. Facing a red-white. Is this the Aura deck? It is, so Nowhere to Run is going to be at its best here. Okay, so I don't mind playing Nowhere to Run, potentially waiting until the opponent's turn, in case they want to commit an Aura or a Pump Spell. Even though we miss out on the Prowess trigger. Because I think I prefer picking up Nowhere to Run with a Fear as opposed to the Stormchaser's Talent. Scavenger, that happens. So they might have a Monstrous Rage they want to use. I'll let them go to damage, and then I can just know where to run the Scavenger now, perhaps. Momentum Breaker answers the hero. Yeah, that's fine. And then we get to increase our speed. Doing it the other way around would have worked out better, since then we don't take the 1 damage from hero, but we didn't know we were top decking it. So we're not dealing a ton of damage, but we have a lot of removal, and the aura deck is sometimes creature light with lots of pump spells and auras. So that's how we kind of plan to win the game, run the opponent out of creatures. And yeah, Fear of Isolation picks up Nowhere to Run. Played now to trigger Prowess. And then Nowhere to Run makes it so their Shard Mage's Rescue doesn't work. And the ward from Sheltered by Ghosts is not going to matter either. So this is the best card you can have for this matchup. Opponent's trying anyway, but they're gonna find out the hard way. And our opponent explodes, I'll take it. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a keepable hand. Siren into some interaction. Might need to explore to hit more land drops. And are we playing a mirror match? Nope, opponent on what looks to be a Reanimator deck. Yeah, combo can be a tough matchup. This hand, for instance, making the opponent discard could be helping them, and or creature removal isn't super helpful. I think I still want to explore, or I could just play Fear, pick up Siren for now, and then next turn go exploring. If I'm not interested in picking up my own Nightmare. Sure. Still want to wait and see what exactly our opponent's playing. But yeah, the Great Door, a way to set up Reenact a Crime plus Omniscience next turn, for instance. So, yeah, gotta go exploring. Hope to hit a land, and then I can still Siren explore again. Okay. I think that's better than our alternatives. I guess Siren and play Talent is reasonable too. But yeah, if our opponent's got the perfect hands, it's going to be tricky to stop them. Could have kept up this town in big enough to bounce an Omniscience after they put it in play. But I think I needed to apply a bit more pressure first. Opponent discards the Desecrator, so we'll see if they can reenact the crime. Main phase, activate Great Door, discard Atraxa. I guess that's also pretty good to reenact. And yeah, there it is. So in that case, bouncing wouldn't have helped. So that's what they're working with. Another reenact a crime. Can get back Jace. Breach the Multiverse isn't bad either. Now at least bouncing the Atraxa is a good answer. Momentum Breaker can also get rid of it. But next turn our opponent can just repeat the process, maybe with Breach the Multiverse as well. So I think I still explore to try and hit my land. Another town ain't big enough. I think a land is better. Although I could also keep it on top, just because if they breach, it's not a card that's helpful for breach. I think I still want to dig towards lands. Attack. Their opponent's gonna reenact once again. This time with the Breach the Multiverse. And what did they get? Conspiracy Unraveler to cast more spells for free. Yeah, that's gonna be rough, and even a Kaito.
The housewarming party has arrived.
So opponent can easily cast something for free. Could be Atraxa. And then they can cast something else for free. Another Breach and keep going. That doesn't look like we're gonna live to tell the tale.
Emotions are distractions. Focus on the facts.
Opponent mills themselves to enable the Unraveler.
Shatter your mind.
And then at some point Breach can get back Jace. And they're gonna mill me out. So they can probably just end it right now. They've got 2 cards left, so they have to be careful as well. Jace mills me. 12 cards remain. Do you have another Jace in hand? If we both mill, then of course I'm the one drawing first, so I would still lose. Cast Atraxa. And there's another Breach as their last card here, so they can cast it. And that's gonna get back Jace, and that's gonna mill us out. Nothing I can do in my upkeep, I'm afraid, to force the opponent to draw. So opponent mills me out. And just double checking, but I don't think there's anything I can do. Bounce something with this town ain't big enough, doesn't help. Nothing that lets my opponent draw a card. Can only make them discard at most, so yeah, that's the game. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a fine hand. Talent into... We'll see, turn 2. Could go Nightmare tap land or just Fear pick up talents. And our opponent on a... what could be Esper Pixie deck. Don't have a clear answer to the Scavenger, so that's kind of scary. I think spamming Nightmare might be better than making lots of Otter tokens, even though Curiosity wants us to go wide. Yeah, that's actually a close call. Maybe Fear, pick up Talent is still the way to go. But yeah, opponent's playing white, so they could also have Sheltered by Ghosts as a nice answer to the Curiosity. Of course, more bounce spells like this town ain't big enough are a pretty good tempo play. So Curiosity is not the best in the mirror match. The +1 counters are not a huge deal when we can eventually send their creatures packing. And now Nightmare make me discard. Yeah, it feels bad to discard my own Nightmare. Possible Curiosity just has to go since it's too ambitious. Because yeah, this is going to be a pretty grindy game. I don't think I can get rid of Town Ain't Big Enough Land or Nightmare. So that leaves Talent versus Curiosity, but Talent plus my instant is kind of a powerful late game in and of itself. Yeah, might be Curiosity here. Even though it is one way we can snowball card advantage. Feels like if they have removal for Fear, that plan falls apart. So, play Talents, play Nightmare. I guess I could play Nightmare first, giving them a little bit less information when they have to discard. And attack. And then this is a good answer to an Otter token as well, potentially. No blocks. Okay. So opponent might have Town Ain't Big Enough that they want to play at instant speed. We have our own copy, which we can combine with the Nightmare, or we could know where to run the Scavenger before it gets out of hand. But I'm kind of liking Town Inn big enough just so we get to trigger Prowess twice before attacking. And then the question is bounce Scavenger or bounce Otter. It's probably the Otter still. Even though if they go with the Sheltered by Ghost next turn, and I don't draw a 4th land, I won't be able to know where to run to answer it. So that's the concern. But it feels like they can pretty easily redeploy the Scavenger. So our opponent gets to play an Entity Tracker, alright, wasn't expecting that one, but makes sense. Couldn't block our 3/3s, so our opponent is behind, but a Sheltered by Ghosts is what they need here. Fear of Isolation, yeah, into a Nightmare, that's 2 enchantments, so that is quite a bit of damage. Is it lethal? 5, 6, 7... 8, 9, so it's going to be 1 short. And then, yeah, nowhere to run can go, since we can bounce our Nightmare for lethal. But yeah, had they put the counter on one of these, then they would have been 1 short. And now we can just bounce. Doesn't matter. And close out the game. And yeah, that'll do it. Still a very close game. The white version has its advantages, being able to run Scavenger and Pixie, and potentially a few Sheltered by Ghosts. But the blue-black version has some advantages as well. Sweet, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw. This hand needs to draw 2 lands in a row, pretty much. Although 1 land could still go a long way, and then eventually we get Kaito down, with Drowner being a good creature to pick back up to enable ninjutsu. So it's not perfect, but on the draw I'm willing to give it a shot. Just need to draw land in our first 2 draw steps. On the play that would have been a mulligan for sure. Facing a controlling red-white deck maybe? Could still be Boros Burn. And kind of like Siren Explorer. But our opponent might have removal up here, so then it doesn't line up great. So it could also be Fear, pick up Talent. I think I want to try and set up my lands, and then I'll explore onto the Otter, since Siren's better to pick up with Kaito. So this maximizes our odds of setting up Kaito. And yeah, opponent had the Lightning Helix, so no exploring. No 3rd land either. Alright, so we're not off to an amazing start. Opponent's gonna get lost. Surprised they waited. But now what? I guess that happens. And then I can still Fear, pick up Talent, over playing the Drowner at instant speed. Actually could also pick up a land and then explore. Kinda like that more. Alright, so now we have our land for next turn at least. Opponent's got the Forge. Pretty good at pressuring Kaito as well. Although this is kind of my chance to get Kaito in play. Although they could have more copies of Get Lost. What's the alternative? I mean, our opponent's gonna have board wipes in there too. I think it's still fine. And then opponent can make a 2-powered creature, so even if I plus another Lightning Helix can take out Kaito, they could cast a bargained Torture Tower as well, so I guess I'll just draw and then keep the land.
Now I know your weakness.
So we can potentially protect Kaito by removing their token. But yeah, opponent just had another Get Lost. Do we have another Kaito as well? Finding a copy of this down in big enough to bounce Forge can eventually reset it. I don't think I'm playing 4 mana Kaito. I really want to be able to ninjutsu it. So then Fear, pick up Talent, keep up Drowner could be the play. As opposed to Exploring, which is also an option. Although we gotta watch out for Sunfall, so I don't really want to tap down their 3-1. Because then they could Sunfall second main and clean up the board. So we'll see here. Alright, so our opponent does nothing. Do I still play the Drowner anyway? I think I do. Attack. Ninjutsu Kaito. Pick up Drowner and hope to find another lane, basically.
Eyes up and stay out of the shadows and into the fray.
Alright, found the untap land.
Got you beat 6 different ways.
So now we can keep up our various 2-mana plays. Drowner or Nowhere to Run can both work. Opponent sends in the Bivouac. So I guess I need to use Drowner then. Tapping down the Horror token. And so I can block the Might. Assuming Bivouac puts counter on itself. So Kaito's still alive. Bivouac we can still know where to run in the future. Okay, so let's see here. Do we want to +1 Kaito for some reason? I think we're still drawing with it. 5 damage per turn could work out. And then I guess Nightmare plus Fear can also empty the opponent's hand somewhat. So let's go ahead and attack. Don't think I'm exploring. Another Fear and another Drowner are both fine.
Now I know your weakness.
Opponent had a Sunfall. So do we Fear pick up Nightmare now? Yeah. And then I'll still have the Nowhere to Run available. Possible I was better off just drawing the Drowner, so I have that to once again lock down the Phyrexian token. Opponent has to cast a Sunfall. But we should be able to handle it. Take out her token. And then we can maybe go exploring onto Kaito, or we can bounce our Nightmare back a few times. So that hits for 4. And then pick up Nightmare for the last 2 points. Alright, that worked out after we kept a pretty sketchy opening hand. But yeah, Kaito is definitely one of the payoffs for this style of deck, and also a card that maybe incentivizes you to keep things simple with a blue-black version as opposed to going into Esper, where it's maybe a little bit more difficult to make Kaito happen, also because the Drowner has such excellent synergy with it, and that's one of the cards you would lose out if you play the white cards as well. So yeah, the blue-black version of the Bounce deck is quite powerful in the current standard meta, also translates exceptionally well into best of 3, where you can adapt the deck to fight pretty much any strategy, adding cheap counter counter spells for the combo and control matchups, which in game 1 are probably going to favor the combo and control decks, as we saw. So yeah, that's definitely one of the weaknesses in the best of 1 build, since we do need to include some amount of creature removal, which might end up being dead in those matchups. But yeah, once you find additional counter spells and cut some of your dead removal, you still have good pressure plus your discard package to attack the opponent's hand. So usually you've got most angles covered. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.